Chris Maxwell. I am the Director of Public Relations and Media for AAS, and I'm super happy to have Dr. Jonathan Singer here, who is the President of AAS. Jonathan, thank you for joining me this afternoon or morning or whatever time it is where you are.
Chris, it is a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Jonathan and I were just talking about dealing with working from home and sometimes dealing with trying to coordinate time zones can be pretty difficult. I know our central office is there in DC. I work in the central time zone, so trying to flip-flop back and forth sometimes causes some issues. And I'm sure that a lot of people this week especially are dealing with those working from home issues, working remotely. There's technology issues. So there's a whole bunch of stuff that comes into consideration that I don't think any of us had really anticipated on dealing with. One of those things is, in fact, regarding why we're here today, AAS20. We announced, I believe it was on Tuesday, all the days this week have run together. On Tuesday, we announced that AAS20 is going all virtual. And so, Jonathan, if you want to maybe lead us off a little bit and tell us what kind of went behind that decision-making process, what that means for the conference itself, and then we can jump into some questions if we get them.
Absolutely. So the decision to transition from an on-ground to a virtual conference included a bunch of factors. Top of mind always was the health and well-being of our members, the participants, and the public in general. One of the things that we were doing with the conference this year is we were looking at issues of equity, diversity and inclusion in suicide prevention. We were looking at the ways in which people and systems interacted in ways that worked or didn't work. And when the COVID-19 global pandemic came into the American consciousness, we were aware of a number of issues related to this conference. On one hand, in the early days, we were aware that there were some of the most vulnerable folks in our society were losing jobs as a result of this pandemic. And early reports were suggesting that parts of the country might be at greater risk, but not to cancel conferences because that could have devastating effects for people that we already know are at higher risk for suicide. As the information about the pandemic grew and the risk for the pandemic spread, we needed to address the very real issue of how to continue to provide this really essential piece of information, these really essential pieces of information for suicide prevention and postvention in a way that would meet the needs of people who were struggling with a new reality. Now, there are lots of times where Americans have struggled through a crisis. Sometimes we have kept our eyes on the prize when it comes to suicide prevention. Sometimes we've dropped the ball on that. We wanted to make sure that we were able to continue to provide information about how and why we go about addressing suicide risk, especially knowing that with what looks like will be a significant economic downturn, the possibility for significant social isolation, both of which are important factors in suicide risk, that we were able to continue to provide this information to folks in a way that was equitable, that respected people's needs, and that it addressed the new reality. And so once we were able to address some of the financial barriers that we had with regards to the on-ground conference, and we were able to work with our partners, we finally were at a place where, after keeping options open, we were able to transition to a virtual conference structure, one that we would be able to provide what we had promised members of AAS and the public in general in terms of content and information around suicide prevention?
Yes to all of that. And I think, I mean, I'll speak for myself, but I am really excited to offer the conference in this platform in this way, because of a lot of the reasons that you mentioned, that so many of our members and so many of the people who try to make it every year, or as frequently as possible, for whatever reason, a lot of people can't, right? And a lot of people fall into vulnerable populations, and stuff happens, life happens, right? There's a lot of people. The way the conference typically falls, sometimes it interrupts life events like graduations or prom or whatever the case is, outside of the bigger kinds of things. So I think it'll be really interesting to see what we can do with this, and how we make it work and how everything rolls out. But I think it's a great opportunity to provide content for more people more effectively than we would if we just canceled, right? And then obviously to different types of people. So and that comes with a completely different perspective, right? And a completely different set of engagement points and interactive features that will be very, very interesting. We've been lucky and honored to receive a lot of feedback this week and in previous weeks. But when we announced the virtual switch, we've got a lot of really good questions, and it makes sense that our members would have questions about some of these things. So I think the first one, Jonathan, and you'll help me answer this, I hope, is and the one that we've gotten probably the most is, what does this do in relative terms for pricing of the conference?
Well, we don't have an answer to the question about pricing yet, because pricing has to do with a bunch of things. When it's a land-based conference, pricing rests in part on the cost of the venue, all the audio-visual equipment, things like that. We are in the process of figuring out what the costs are for a virtual conference. And there is a price point where some people will be able to attend and others won't. We also need to consider what it is that we're able to offer. Now, one of the things that I'm most excited about is that nearly all of the invited speakers have agreed to speak in the virtual conference. So that means we've got Shelby Rowe, and we've got Sean Joe and Michael Lindsay, and we've got Lorenzo Lewis, and we've got folks from Brady and the federal government. We've got Dr. Barbara Van Dalen, who's heading up the Prevents initiative. We've got folks who are giving TED Talks and thought leaders, and Vic Armstrong is a frequent commenter on the suicide prevention Twitter feed, and is very visible these days. He is going to be participating, and so we have a phenomenal lineup of folks who are going to be presenting information that at any time, given any circumstances, would be an amazing group of people to listen to. What we're going to do is we're going to encourage them to make it as contemporaneously relevant as makes sense for their talk, which means if you're talking about equity in the science of suicide, and there is something in particular about COVID-19 and what's happening right now, we're encouraging people to talk about that, so that it's not just relevant for suicide prevention in general, but also meaningful for folks. And the question is, like, what does that cost, right? How much should somebody be able to pay for that? That's a question we haven't answered, but our goal is to make sure that it is equitable, that it is fair, that there's good value for the money, and that it's something that meets the needs of folks today. I know literally today, about 5 minutes before we went on air, my son came upstairs and said, "Where's my watch?" Well, this is not something I normally have to worry about during school hours, but He's e-learning. He's at home. And we recognize that this is not a situation where you're going to have people sort of squirreled away in their offices, away from their families. They're going to be at home. And so figuring out what the value of this is also means, how can we make sure that we're being flexible so that people can access the content when and how they need to? And these are all questions that we are working on, and we'll have answers to them very soon.
That the biggest piece, I think, and you just sort of hinted at it, was that this is going to be sort of a living content situation where we have, the hope is that we have not just the main talks, the main stage talks, but possibly some other opportunities for folks to present as well. Whether that comes in the form of concurrent sessions or sort of an ongoing platform of sorts. So we hope to really provide everybody here with a lot of value, like you said, value for their money, value for their time. Things can take place on demand. So this is a lot of content, and I think it's really important that we get the price point right. And I know that we are going to be having these conversations over the next few days, so we should have more information very soon in terms of price.
And what I'll say about, I was going to say, let me just say about price, right? So if you're registered for the conference right now, and your organization is not requiring you to ask for a refund, then just hang out, right? There's no need to ask us for a refund to your registration right now. You can hang out, and then depending on what the price point is, there might be, you're definitely registered for the virtual conference. You might get some money back when we figure out the price point. And there might be different options for different folks at different levels. So right now, if you're registered, just hang out unless there is an urgent need to submit that refund request.
Very important to note. So like you said, and this was actually one of the questions that we've gotten too, is whether or not if someone is registered currently and they want to participate, do they have to re-register for the virtual conference? No, they do not. We will sort that out as we move along, but you are already registered. The other question that we've received is, now that we're moving to a virtual space, can people register just now if they haven't registered previously? Of course. As soon as we figure out the price point and the details, that will all be live on the aasconference.org/registration page. So keep an eye out for that. We'll, of course, make that very clear when we get that information. And then the hope is, again, like I had mentioned, that this is living content, so that if for whatever reason, say you have kids now at your home, like you do, Jonathan, that this is going to be content that if you can't make it on the conference dates, then you should be able to, we hope to set it up this way, that you'll be able to purchase a post registration later on, and then have access to all of that content, again, on demand. So a lot of different options, a lot of things, and a lot of details that we have to sort out yet. So so we want to get it right. That was actually the next question, so we're good.
And what I'll say is that, this is a moment in time where there are so many things up in the air. And the reason why we are moving ahead with the virtual conference, even though we have all these questions, is because we believe in the value of this information for suicide prevention. We believe that this is worth our time and energy, that this is good value for members of AAS, and it is good for the public to have this conference to continue. Now, obviously, Chris and I have spent a lot of time and energy setting up this conference, as well as Lena Hallman and Brandon Johnson and Colleen Creighton and Amy Culp and all the folks at Central Office. Everybody's put in a lot of time. But the fact that we put in a lot of time isn't why we're doing the virtual conference. It's because it's the right thing to do, and it's the right thing to do for members and the general public. So the fact that we are still figuring out some details should not come as a surprise. There are people that spend months organizing online conferences, and we're a couple of weeks into pivoting. So we will absolutely have that information for you. And if you have questions, please just answer them. If they're not things that we have already provided answers to, it's possible that either we don't have the answers yet or nobody's asked us the question. So we do want to know. And so you can email me, you can email Chris. There are lots of folks that you can reach out to. And we want to make sure that we're getting those answers to you as quickly as possible.
Yep. And one of the main pieces of conversation that we've had within the planning committee too is, and especially with regard to switching and transitioning over to virtual conferences, are we doing this just to hold the conference, right? And that's not the point here. We're being very intentional with this. We're being very intentional with the transition of the content. So this is absolutely what you just mentioned. So the next question, I guess, that we have to kind of address here is, what about the pre-conference situation? Because we had a whole bunch of pre-conference, individual pre-conference sessions and workshops. There was going to be the Crisis Services Continuum pre-conference. There's a post-vention, the Power of Post-vention pre-conference. Where do we stand on those, Jonathan?
Yeah, well, so this is a really important piece, and in terms of the language, Chris, you used the word pre-conference. These actually, the Crisis Continuum and the Postvention, these were actually standalone conferences that we were sequencing prior to AAS20 because we had the folks coming. It made sense for them to be able to access the Crisis Continuum and the Postvention, but these are actually standalone conferences, and people are making decisions as we speak about whether or not the content is something that can be provided in a virtual space. Again, this is part of our intentionality around addressing these issues as we pivot. What we don't want is just to provide content because it was going to be provided or we really want it to be provided. It has to be something that makes sense online, in an online environment. And so right now the conversations are happening, and I don't want to speak out of turn by saying it is or it isn't happening for the sorry, I just swallowed my my own tongue for a second. For the Crisis Continuum or the Postvention. But as soon as we know, we will let you know.
Yep, and those conversations with the heads of those conferences are ongoing. We just had a conference call with our Crisis Services committee yesterday, where we had initially talked about it. So those are going to be ongoing conversations. Again, that can easily be content that is wrapped up into this ongoing idea that we might have. So there's a lot of different options. There is a question about whether or not CEs are still going to be provided. For every situation that we can think of, that's still going to be the case. If it changes, we're going to let you know. But as of right now, CEs will still be available for the hours and content that we're going to provide.
And let me just say this, it's really important. I'm a clinical social worker. I'm licensed. I have to get continuing education. And the American Association of Suicidology Conference has always been one of my favorite places to do that because the content is always applicable to the work that I'm doing. And Amy has always made it really easy to get those continuing education hours. The one thing that I will say for you, those of you watching, if you're watching and you need continuing education hours, we will be sending out information about these CEs or the CEUs, and we need you to check in with your specific state to make sure that the online hours that you're getting are going to work for you. We are approved continuing education providers, so that's good. But you need to check in with your state to make sure that the fact that it's now online is going to work for your state. For example, Texas, you can go all online. Pennsylvania, not so much. It could be that you've done no continuing education in Pennsylvania so far, towards your license. And so all of the CEs through the virtual conference will be just fine. But if you've already done most of your CEs, or you've used up your online CE allotment, then you need to know that too. We can't figure that out for you. You have to figure that out for yourself. But it's very easy, and most of you will already know this. But just think about that when you're thinking about the continuing education units that you'll get through this conference.
Yep. And we know that that's a huge piece for a lot of people. So of course, it's going to be important for us to continue to provide. We've had a couple of really interesting questions about now that we're going virtual. Is it possible for multiple people to participate? And previously, with the in-person conference, we had offered group discounts. We will continue to offer a group discount and a group sort of platform. You'll get a group code to log into the platform, and we'll use that. And then that way you can, if you purchase that group discount, you can have your department view the sessions, or you can cram very low numbers of people into the same room because we're trying to observe social distancing. And if you have people in the same room, just make sure they're 6 feet apart. But yeah, those options will be available, and we'll have more details as that kind of comes out. And I think those were a couple of questions. The one thing that I wanted to bring up as well, we had put out this information regarding presenter status when we sent out the email on Tuesday. There was a lot of information during that time being sent out. And so I just want to highlight again that one of the biggest things we're asking folks, especially presenters, if you were scheduled to present, we need you to go on to the website, find that presenter form, and fill it out. That way we know that you are capable, willing, and still available to present virtually. And when, the details surrounding when and how that's all going to work out, we'll figure out. But we need you to let us know that you're still capable of presenting. Like I said, if you go to aasconference.org, it will be in that header section with all of the new information about the virtual conference. There's a link for the virtual presenter form, and you'll want to fill that out. We absolutely need you to complete that, and we will have more communications going out about that. We'll have something going on Monday, and then we'll have follow-ups as well. So that's really important. You want to say something, Jonathan?
Yeah, I want to say it's super important to do it as soon as possible. And here's the main reason why. We know that some of you want to present, but are not actually allowed because of your workplace. Please let us know. We also know that some of you want to present, but cannot because you now have little coworkers that will make it impossible for you to commit to presenting. Please let us know. There are some of you that have spent a long time working on a community-based project, that have something really innovative that is more important than ever to share. We need to know that, so that when we are working on the sessions beyond the invited speakers, we're making sure that we get everybody who has important information scheduled for the conference. So please let us know so that we can make sure that we continue to program something that is going to be as important and relevant for everybody as possible.
Yep. What about poster presentations? Are those going to be available? How's that going to work?
So we're working on an option for posters. Posters are actually one of the models that is easiest to translate into an online environment. You've created your poster, you save it as a PDF, you upload it, you have your abstract that you submitted so people have text, and then you have an option for some integration for conversation. Now, in terms of poster sessions, the way that we had originally scheduled them, which is there's an hour here or there's an hour here, and there's beverages available, obviously that's not going to happen. But having something online where you can say, I did this work, I presented it at a conference, absolutely that's something that we're looking at. Now, if we hear from 200 of the 210 people who were going to present posters saying, I can't or I don't want to, then we're not going to do it simply because we won't have the numbers. But if we hear back and we hear, yes, I would love to be able to have this on my CV, or yes, I worked really hard and I really want people to have this out here, or I was hoping that people could see this and now I know that they will, please let us know that so that we can make sure that we pull all that information into our decision making. The sooner you do that, the better. If we're able to have all this information by next Friday, which is the 27th, that would be phenomenal. Earlier is even better, but by Friday the 27th, so that we can make some decisions about what's happening next, so that you can have decisions, you can make decisions about what you're doing next, is really important. So please let us know if you've already been accepted to present at the conference. Let us know if you are willing and able, and then we will talk about how you can be ready to present.
Okay, very important stuff. I keep saying very important stuff, and I know that this is one of those things you're like, if it wasn't important, we wouldn't be here. So yeah, that's these are really great questions too. And so I also wanted to point out, if anybody is watching and has any questions, so please let us know in the comments. Joelle did have one earlier regarding, so her talk was going to be one of the TED style talks, and so to be able to translate that into this type of virtual setting, it's going to take a little bit of work. And that's totally fine. We know that there are going to be some issues with some of these with some of these formats, and we're open and flexible to anything that you need to do to adapt. But if you have questions, obviously ask too. But we're going to be very understanding when it comes to this stuff. So poster presentations. The next question for from presenter was whether or not, if they can't do the virtual conference for whatever reason, can they defer their presentation to 2021 in Orlando?
No. And there are two reasons for this. Number one, next year's conference is going to have a new conference planning committee. There's going to be a new theme. There's going to be a new focus. And we want to make sure that we're continuing to present, as we do every year, that we're continuing to offer the most current and the most important information for suicide prevention, intervention, and postvention. And it doesn't mean that the work that you've done isn't still going to be important or relevant. We just want to be able to make sure that it's being evaluated by next year's group. And so if you've already submitted and it was accepted, then submit again. And we would love to be able to see that again. The other reason is because, actually, I just forgot the other reason. So let's.
Well, I'll add a reason. So you may not want to present the same thing that you've been approved for next year. You may have something more innovative pop up that you're involved in, or your research may have changed dramatically, or whatever the case. So this isn't just about our planning ability, but for you to plan too. So there's a lot of different reasons.
Now, one of the things that we can say is that for those of you who are students, who are academics, early career, later career, all of the major citation styles, AMA, LMA, or APA, MLA, Chicago style, I've seen things online come out about how to update your CV to say that the conference is now virtual, or the conference was, your presentation was accepted, but the conference is now canceled, right? So there are ways to continue to have that information on your CV. And I realize that CVs are only a small part for a small percentage of the population, but many people who submit posters and papers are folks that are in academic settings where this is an important piece of professional development and career advancement. And that is one of the pieces that we honor and acknowledge in the American Association of Suicidology, which is the science of suicide.
Yep. Okay, so the next one is, okay, we've kind of answered this. But I guess it's okay to maybe get into the weeds a little bit, but how will sessions be handled virtually? What is that going to look like? And so we've been doing a lot of research on different sorts of presenting platforms, and it will honestly be very similar to an interactive webinar. We've looked at it, like I said, a whole bunch of different platforms. We found one that I think is going to work the best, and we will have some different capabilities for engaging everybody, for allowing questions. So really, it'll be very similar to that, just as you might expect with any other sort of virtual experience.
And also, let me jump in there. One of the things that we're likely to do is to have a situation where at a certain time you'll log on and you'll be able to see Sean Joe, for example, talking about equity in the science of suicide. So that'll be a lecture style talk, and you'll be able to you leave comments, you'll be able to interact with other folks while they're watching it through a chat function. If we are able to provide concurrent sessions, which means that we have papers that are going on consecutively, or possibly 2 or 3 streams of papers going on consecutively, like you would in a traditional conference, each one of those rooms, right, that has multiple papers going on consecutively, that'll have its own link. So you'll just be able to click onto a link and go into the room to see people's presentations. And one of the beautiful things about this is that, unlike a land-based conference, where if you show up to a room and it's not something that you're interested in, or you thought you were interested but there's no space, like, then you have to go somewhere else. Like, this is, you're at your computer, the conference comes to you, so you can click around links, you can go see other things. Super seamless for the attendee. It's not a better experience than in person. It's different. And so there are different benefits to it. But it's going to be really easy for the attendee to attend the sessions and to switch to different sessions if we have multiple streams going on.
Yeah, you don't have to worry about sneaking out if you find yourself falling asleep or whatever.
That's exactly right.
Which I want to clarify: the content that we're going to have is not going to put anyone to sleep.
No,
but yeah,
it's not. But sometimes those rooms are either too cold or too hot.
Yeah. Yep.
And if that happens this year, it's on you. But the other thing that I'll say is that we are going to continue to have social media. Right? So we are going to have people who are live tweeting, who are posting things about the conference in the same way that we were going to have for the on-ground conference. So the content will continue to be spread so that folks, for whatever reason, who are unable to attend the virtual conference will still have access to some of the life-saving and life-affirming information that's being shared at AAS20.
Yeah, and there's at least for some of the virtual conferences that I've attended in the past, it makes participating in that social media stuff a lot easier. You don't have to worry about looking like you're not paying attention. You're able to type really easily. So we hope that people will feel more comfortable in engaging with social media as well. But yeah, we'll have people doing the same stuff we would normally. Yeah, so I think, like, I'm looking through here some of the questions. I think we covered some of the main stuff. The one I did want to bring up though too, because I had separately received this question, was about the awards process. And we want to make sure that everybody knows that if you've received an award, you're still going to receive that award. We need to figure out what that's going to look like, and I think we have some really good plans for this. I think people are going to be happy with it, but again, it will be a little bit different. We want to make sure that folks who have received the honor of getting an award receive that in a way that's appropriate and still very meaningful, because it certainly is. We don't want folks to feel like they've not received the recognition that they deserve. So we want to make that right. We want to make it work. And we'll let people know how that's all going to play out.
Another thing about the awards is that people receive awards not because of the conference. They receive awards because of the contributions that they've made. And it happens at conference time typically because that's when you have thousands of people who can applaud these folks, who can honor and recognize them. So absolutely, award winners, you will be getting the awards, and those of you in the community will be able to celebrate them. Now, complete pivot, totally not related to awards. Some people have asked about, can they hold on to their registration and defer it until next year's conference? And the answer is yes. Obviously, we would love for you to participate in this year's conference, but if for whatever reason you can't, we will hold your registration for Orlando 2021.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. That's definitely an important one, and those options are all available on the website on one form regarding how you want to handle your registration, your current registration. So you will need to fill those out and let us know how you want us to handle your current registration. The other question that we had was regarding volunteers. We typically let people sign up to be volunteers in person at the conference, and that can range from any number of things, whether it's helping setting up signs, helping to stuff bags, those kinds of things. And so we still will need volunteers. We're working with our membership coordinator on how that's going to all work, and with Amy, of course, how that's going to look. I will say that one thing we will certainly need, and for folks to keep in mind once we set up this process, is that if we do go forward with concurrent sessions, which I very much hope that we do, we will need moderators for those specific rooms. And we would absolutely welcome the help of some of our more experienced moderator volunteers in doing those types of things. So keep that stuff in mind too. Like I said, we're gonna have a whole bunch of information coming out pretty quickly over the next couple of weeks. So, and you'll see in the scrolling banner at the bottom, you can visit aasconference.org for more updates. Email conference@suicidology.org with any questions or concerns, and we'll make sure that we highlight them. What else, Jonathan?
I just want to, maybe on an ending note, just to reemphasize the fact that our decision to pivot from an on-ground to a virtual conference obviously was informed by the current pandemic, but the decision to not cancel was informed by the fact that this conference has content that will be even more important moving forward because of the pandemic than it was prior to the pandemic. And I'm talking about issues of equity, ways that people are marginalized and disempowered in systems. We can see it playing out in real time right now, how organizations and systems are either responding to those most in need or not. And we realize that not everybody will be able to participate in a virtual conference. The fact that we are holding it doesn't mean that we are discounting folks' experiences, especially those who cannot now participate. What it means is that we are creating an opportunity for folks to be able to consume the content when they are able to, in a way that they can. So I just wanted to emphasize that this is one of the things that we're doing that is the pivoting to virtual is fully consistent with our desire to take an equity lens to suicide prevention, and that all of the decisions that we're making as we pivot include addressing issues of equity. For example, one of the platforms that we're considering using has automated transcription of sessions that will be available at the end of sessions. And this addresses issues of equity in terms of accessibility to the conference. Like I said, my son walked in 5 minutes before this started. This addresses the issues related to childcare, related to employment, related to availability. There's so many other issues that I could point to, but these are some of the ways that we are thinking about the conference to make sure that as we move forward, we're doing it through an equity lens, and so that we're able to provide important content in a way that acknowledges those who are most often left out of the conversation.
And I think this is going to be a really kind of cool way that we can sort of continue this legacy of equity and inclusion over the course of forever, right?
Yes.
As long as AAS is around, and we're doing this conference, because this gives us an opportunity to sort of soft test what having content like this available in the future would look like. Tom Cruise pointed out that this might be a way that we can start looking at offering some of these things virtually in the future. It's an excellent point. It's an excellent way to continue this equity framework, and making sure that we have increased access for folks that can't normally make it. So yeah, I think those are the questions that I had for today. We had a couple questions come through, so we appreciate everybody who jumped on and watched and asked questions and engaged. Jonathan, did you have anything else?
I just want to say that I'm really appreciative of central office staff, Chris, your work. The AASconference.org website is beautiful. You switched it from a website that reflected a conference happening in Portland to a conference that's happening virtually. It looks amazing. I hope everybody checks that out. And really the enormous work that all the folks at central office are putting into it. And like Chris said at the top of the hour, we are a member-based organization. It is important that we are meeting the needs of our members. So please contact us with your questions and concerns. Conference@suicidology.org is the best email to send for general questions. And we'll make sure that we continue to hold these Facebook Live events, and that we continue to send out communications to everyone to keep folks updated.
That brings me to another point. You can email us. We are sending out a lot of emails to you. If you're not receiving those communications for whatever reason and you feel like you should be, please email me directly and I'll make sure to put you on our email list. My email is just cmaxwell@suicidology.org. But really, I think it's important to remember too that any of the communications that go out are going to go out through our social media, through the listserv, as well as emails, and then be posted on the website. So if you check any one of those, you're going to be getting the same information that everybody else is. But keep an eye on that stuff. So Stephen Canova asked, how will presenters be informed of the tech needs necessary to present virtually? Once we sort of narrow down once we sort of look at who is available to present, and we get a full accounting and listing of all of that, we'll be able to email and communicate directly with the presenters as to tech needs, requirements, all of that fun stuff. I will say that the requirements are going to be very low. I don't think anyone is probably going to have any major issues, but we'll come to that when we get there. If you have a computer and a webcam, I think you'll be able to do it even with those low level of requirements. So.
Yeah, and I'll just say that if you have a laptop and a webcam and you've got a corded headset, you can plug that in. Sounds great. Chris, looks like you're wearing AirPods or some sort of like Bluetooth, right? Sounds good. I've got this sort of kind of bulkier headgear, and I've got an HD webcam, but you don't need all of this. If you have ever considered getting one of these because it sounds better and it looks better, now's the time, right? Go for it. You're going to be spending a lot of time in front of webcams over the next couple of months, so you might as well have good equipment. But there is nothing that we are going to be expecting of you that will be prohibitive in terms of presenting. Yep.
And like I said, we'll communicate all of that when we get there here in a couple of weeks and days. So yeah, I think we covered it for now.
Excellent. For now, until the next one, which will probably be next week.
Yeah, we'll probably look at doing this again on Friday, Jonathan, if you're available. We'll just keep the communication rolling and make sure that everybody has a good sense of what's going on. So Again, thanks. Seriously, thank you to everybody who jumped on. We really appreciate the engagement and the communication and the questions. So please keep sending your questions. We'll keep sending you notices and information. But otherwise, have a wonderful weekend, and we'll talk to you later.
Have a good one, y'all. Bye.